Alright, today we are going to be talking about accommodations for students with autism spectrum disorder. This way you know how to help these students the best you can in your lecture halls, depending on what class you teach. It'll be easier for you to help them out, and it'll be a more successful learning environment as a whole. The first thing that we need to talk about is sensory overload. There could be triggers anywhere for students with autism spectrum disorders, anywhere in your classroom, so you need to be prepared to work on your feet. The possible accommodations to support a student with sensory differences include allowing hats, sunglasses, and tinted lenses to be worn and allowing earplugs or earphones. Also, allowing the student to choose their seat and helping them to assure it is always available may be important. If requested by the student, an alternative writing instrument for tests and assignments and/or a computer for classwork, tests, and assignments might also be an appropriate accommodation. A student with an autism spectrum diagnosis may find that a small sensory item will bring them comfort in class. It's likely if a student uses a sensory item that it's inconspicuous, but this may not always be the case. Be aware that a student may make a last-minute request for a seating change and or to leave abruptly due to a sensory overload. So help devise an accessible plan to address an urgent sensory issue for the student. You just need to make sure that you have those plans in place before the student has a meltdown. The next idea that we need to talk about is communication. By definition, all students with autism spectrum disorder, according to the diagnostic criteria, have some problems which may interfere with receptive or expressive communication. Some of these differences are subtle, and some can lead to misunderstandings that are misinterpreted as violational acts on the part of the student. Students with autism spectrum disorder may be very articulate and have a large vocabulary which hide their communication challenges. Those supporting students on the autism spectrum should become aware of each individual student's weaknesses in this area. Some of these are listed with our accommodations. So our accommodations for this area for a college student would be including providing the instructor's lecture notes or a note taker to help key in on important information, providing a study guide for tests, allowing longer verbal response time from the student, and allowing for important exchanges of information to be done in written form. It would also be helpful for instructors to be clear, concise, concrete, and logical when communicating, as well as asking for clarification. Don't make assumptions about what students truly understand. Our next area of what we're looking at is social skills, which can actually affect their performance greatly, though some may not think in college classrooms social skills aren't as prominent as younger grades, but they actually can affect their performance greatly. The social challenges for a student on the autism spectrum disorder include problems understanding others' perspectives, a sharing space, and making eye contact. Many high-functioning individuals with an autism spectrum disorder have extreme social anxiety and have difficulty negotiating with others and interacting and working in pairs or groups. These students likely will not understand the unwritten classroom etiquette and will often misinterpret facial expressions and nonverbal cues. Possible accommodations for these students include allowing for short breaks to leave the class or allowing the student to have a social buffering object, which might include a computer, book, or other object that initially might seem distracting or out of place. Honoring the student's chosen level of eye contact without judgment also can be helpful. If there's group work assigned for the class, the instructor might assist in the formation and monitoring of pairs and groups of students to ensure that proper inclusion of the student with an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Also, providing written rules for asking questions and other classroom logistics as needed may support students with an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Next would be motor skills. Both fine and gross motor skills can be affected. Fine motor challenges for students on the autism spectrum might affect writing, drawing, turning pages, using utensils, playing an instrument, using locking keys, and manipulating small objects. Gross motor challenges may affect walking, running, sitting, and balancing. Motor planning and the awareness of the placement of their body in the space can affect the ways in which an individual moves their body and is able to navigate themselves to accomplish all motor tasks. So some possible accommodations for these students on the autism spectrum disorder with the motor skills difficulties include allowing a computer for in-class work, tests, and assignments, providing a note taker, allowing work assignments to be done at a slower pace, providing models and step-by-step instruction, providing extra time to take tests, and providing readers and scribes or technology that reads and takes notes. Further accommodations might need to be considered for students taking physical education courses in which motor skills differences might provide further complications. Our next area would be their learning style. Often they have an uneven learning profile. They often excel creatively in non-conventional ways. Students on the autism spectrum tend to have an excellent long-term and rote memory abilities. Executive functioning deficits cause these students many problems. Many are thought to be right brain thinkers. Most need to think and trust an instructor before they can perform in a class. So some possible accommodations for students to support these learning styles include providing review sheets, work checklists, and sub-deadlines or intermittent check-ins. If possible, provide hands-on learning, models, demonstrations, and other visuals. If possible, pair with peer mentors who might help with feedback and provide proofread opportunities and ongoing structure to keeping on target with work assignments. Instructors can help support students on the autism spectrum by providing reinforcement at every opportunity. Other accommodations that might be helpful for students are allowing advanced negotiations of deadlines, extra time for tests, or separate or quiet places to take tests. Instructors and other college staff can also encourage the use of calendars, computer, traditional phones with alarms, so forth and so on. Most likely the student has experience with using these organizational tools or tools of their choice before they come to college. However, sometimes in a new environment, the tools and skills used and learned to compensate for executive function deficits do not transfer easily to a new setting. Because the setting has changed, the students need extra time to begin to transition the use of these tools and maintain routines in their new environment. So our final area that we should be looking at is their coping skills. Often they describe themselves as dealing with a lot of anxiety and stress. So a possible accommodation in helping these students cope in the moment might be to discreetly ask them if something is overwhelming or if the student needs help or wants to leave. Do not discourage or interrupt behavior unless truly disruptive, and understand that the student does not intend to be disrespectful. Allow sensory items and or other comfort objects in your room. A student who is having a hard time coping might not realize when he or she is being disruptive and needs to leave. The instructor and student can agree on a cue that the instructor can give to signal to the student that it is an okay time to leave. They also can agree on a signal to inform the instructor when the student is overwhelmed or confused. We just need to make sure that we are getting them ready to deal with the demanding college life. It's hard for them to cope sometimes, so it's time for us to help them. So thank you for watching, and I hope this helps you in your classroom so that you're better prepared to help your students in the long run.